Enjoy the ride with Crystal Petrie Consulting.
Hello, my name is Crystal Petrie, and you are watching the Crystal Petrie Consulting Network. It is February, so you know what that means, a celebration all across America of African American history. And I personally am here for it. Before I get started, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel right now so you will know when I post more videos about African American history and people. And if you are interested in having a workshop or a presentation done on this very subject, African American history, you can contact me on my website and schedule an appointment. I will post the link in the description box. That's a tongue twister, that sentence there. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about something rather difficult, I will say. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Now, I know when you hear PTSD, you think of post-traumatic stress disorder. But for Black History Month, we are exploring post-traumatic slave disorder. There is a book that I just finished reading entitled Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. I will post that link to the book in case you want to read it. Dr. DeGruy's definition of post-traumatic slave syndrome is a condition that exists when a population has experienced multi-generational trauma resulting from centuries of slavery and continues to experience oppression and institutionalized racism today. Added to this condition is a belief, real or imagined, that the benefits of society for African Americans in which they live are not accessible to them. This is post-traumatic slave syndrome. This book is a true eye-opening book. It really makes you think, and it really makes you ask a lot of questions. The book is about long-term effects of slavery on the descendants of the enslaved. I'm sure you know that American slavery was the economy that this country was founded and built on. Wealth, money, power, and respect, if you will, that still lasts to this very day, as do the psychological consequences of slavery for the descendants, and even for the descendants of the enslavers. This book starts off with a powerful definition, Sankofa. It means we must return and reclaim our past in order to move toward our future. It is in understanding who we were that will free us to embrace who we are now. And in order to learn who we are now, let's tackle a word that you and I both hear every single day, all day. And that word is race. Race is a concept of society that insists there is a genetic significance behind human variations in skin color that transcends outward appearance. However, race has no scientific merit outside of sociological classifications. There is no significant genetic variations within the human species to justify the division of races. This comes from author James King. He wrote The Biology of Race. While the notion of race is not real at all, the implication of racism in America is. Racism, simply put, means that one group has the power to affect the lives of another group. For example, while some Black people may have some feelings either way towards white people, the reality is that black people as a group lack the power to affect the lives of white people as a group. Black people's feelings toward white people, either way, do not preclude a white person's ability to get a loan, to go to school, to get a mortgage, to live in a certain neighborhood, to get health care, and the list goes on and on and on. According to Dr. Joy DeGruy, slavery has yielded stressors that were both disturbing and traumatic, exacting a wound upon the African American psyche that continues to fester to this day. Let's dive into how slaves and the descendants of slaves suffer from PTSD. The Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5 describes features of the disorder. Some of the things that can cause PTSD are death, threatened death, serious injury, repeated or exposed death and injury, trauma-related serious injury, trauma-related thoughts or feelings, sleep disturbance, and of course the list goes on. Now, in order to be diagnosed with PTSD, a person only has to experience one of these events one time. And it is well known that every slave experienced all of these traumatic events and more every single day. By definition, every slave would have been diagnosed with PTSD. So how are the descendants of slaves living their everyday life suffering from PTSD when they were never slaves? It's a great question, and here is the answer. Hundreds of years of slavery that guaranteed the prosperity, privilege, money, and power of the white people, while correspondingly relegating the black people to a legacy of debt and suffering. It really doesn't matter if African Americans today directly experience slavery, which of course they didn't. What matters is that African Americans today experience trauma that has been handed down generation after generation because of slavery. According to James Comer, it started with the children. He says the slave family existed only to serve the master, and in order to survive physically, psychologically, and socially, the slave family had to develop a system which made survival possible under such degrading conditions. The slave society prepared their children to accept exploitation and abuse, to ignore the absence of dignity and respect for themselves as being black. Now, I can't, but maybe you can imagine raising your children to accept exploitation, to accept abuse, to accept disrespect, so that it will become the norm to them. I cannot wrap my head around that at all. But the slave family, every day, every year, generation to generation, had to do just that, just to try and survive. The individuals and families that survived the slave experience rear their children while simultaneously struggling with their own psychological injuries, and they often exhibited the typical symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder. The children lived and learned the behaviors of their parents and from their parents, while the parents themselves were struggling and suffering. Today, in 2022, all African Americans are those same children who learned those same behaviors from a struggling parent. And it is my responsibility, I feel, to educate you and myself and as many people as I can about post-traumatic slave syndrome and how every slave would have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and to educate you and myself and as many other people as I can, and let you know that every African American walking around today is suffering in some kind of way from PTSD because of trauma passed down from generation to generation due to slavery. It is my desire that through education, mental health help, that this cycle of trauma will eventually come to an end. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you will receive educational videos like this and more. And hopefully you will continue to educate yourself, your friends, and your family. Like this video and give me a thumbs up, and let's continue this very important conversation in the comments below. Let me know what you think about post-traumatic slave syndrome.
So inspiring.